before we start, recap of tomorrow's class. Uh, do I need to learn AI ML? Not the worst thing in the world to learn right now. But AI ML, core ML is a little hard. Also requires some mathematics. So you have to keep that in mind. Like, it'll take a long time to learn it. So I have to. Okay, that's a very big Notion doc. Maybe send it to me at the end of the class. Cool. Let's start. Hold on. Sudo update followed by exit from here. Great. I think I do not need the quotes. I guess if quotes are there, that's fine. ठीक है, ये database URL dev का dev में डाल दिया, prod का prod में डाल दिया. इनको migrate भी कर देते हैं. Let's migrate them. npx prisma migrate dev. Now I am migrating my dev and my prod database so that they get the respective tables that they need. A lot of this that I'm doing right now should not be done in this way. You should not copy paste your environment variables like this by SSHing into a machine. I've repeated this a few times. A developer should never SSH into a machine. Shuru ke liye it's fine, but eventually we'll see other ways to push environment variables to your clusters or wherever. But I'll be clear, it is fine. We're just copying them over by hand. Not the best thing to do. Both the databases have migrated almost. The production database. So I have to create another database. Dot or the in packages / db. db goes out line to the thing to do today. Would be CD pipeline to copy the prod db to dev every day. What happens from time to time is your dev DB goes out of sync with your production DB. From time to time is your dev DB goes out of sync with your production DB. Production has a lot of data. Dev में कोई testing कर रहा है, इतना कम data है. So you copy over that data from time to time from prod to dev. All right, let me create two new servers. First one I'm going to call class testing dev. I'm going to copy इसका URL and paste it in packages/prisma of the dev folder or the dev server. जो dev server है उसके Prisma folder में I'm going to v.env or open the .env file using vim and add the environment variable over here, database underscore URL equal to this. I don't think we need quotes, but let me add them. I've added it here. यहाँ पे I will add the production database. So I have to create another database. New project, class testing prod. This is my production database. Going to copy it. Going to go here. v.env database underscore URL equal to. Exit from here, exit from here. Great. I think I do not need the quotes. I guess if quotes are there, that's fine. ठीक है, ये database URL dev का dev में डाल दिया, prod का prod में डाल दिया. इनको migrate भी कर देते हैं. Let's migrate them. npx prisma migrate dev. Migrate dev. Now I'm migrating my dev and my prod database so that they get the respective tables that they need. A lot of this that I'm doing right now should not be done in this way. You should not copy paste your environment variables like this by SSHing into a machine. I've repeated this a few times. Yeah, developer should never SSH into a machine. Should it's fine, but eventually we'll see other ways to push environment variables to your clusters or wherever. But be clear, it is fine. We're just copying them over by hand. Not the best thing to do. Both the databases have migrated almost. Done and done. Great. Now, what do I have to do next? I have to start my HTTP server. I have to start my WebSocket server. I have to start my front-end server. So let me go to the first one, cd apps / HTTP server. Okay. What command should I run? Should I run npm run dev? Ideally not. Ideally, dev is meant for local development. Start is meant for actually starting it on a production server. But start se pehle you should manually run build. So first I will run, we can actually do a global pnpm run build in both the places. Let's do that. pnpm run build. Globally, I build all three of the applications, WebSocket server, HTTP server, and the Next.js application. Here, what does building mean? It means different things for different applications. For our HTTP server and WebSocket server, it means converting it to JavaScript. For our Next.js server, it means a lot of things, converting all the components to JavaScript, statically generating files, so on and so forth. So for the web server, it means 100 different things. For the HTTP server, it doesn't mean much. For the HTTP server and the WebSocket server, it's just converting the TypeScript files to JavaScript files. Notice one very important thing that is going to kick us in the butt very soon. Generating static pages. ये अभी हालत खराब करेगा. When you are generating these static pages, you are connecting to the database. Why? Because if you look at our apps/web/app/page.tsx, we are using the database here. When this specific file gets statically generated, it gets the first user from the database and renders it over here. We don't have any user in the prod or the dev database. So यहाँ पे undefined आएगा, and we'll later see how to fix it. A bunch of other challenges, but Next.js is going to give us trouble. Abhi ke liye, everything has been successful. All three applications have been built. Now I can start them one by one. Let me go to apps/HTTP server, npm run start. Seems like it is working. It has started on port 3000. अब क्या करूँ? तीन अलग-अलग टर्मिनल खोलूँ क्या? Should I open 3 different terminals and start 3 different processes? What if one of the process crashes? This is where what comes into the picture? process management that Sargam discussed. I don't know how much he discussed yesterday, but this is a common problem you will see. If you're a beginner developer, up npm run starts, you will run npm run start, you will sleep, you will close your laptop, and what will happen is this socket connection will close. This process may or may not run. It might shut down. अगर मैंने exit किया या मैं सोने चला गया इसको बंद करके, if I sleep this and if I stop this and go to my bed, then this process it may leave hanging also, it may stop also. If the process crashes मतलब there is an exception thrown. If the Node.js application crashes for some reason, then also it will become down. We don't want that. We want this to run forever. Even if it crashes, restarts, crashes, restart. Even if I close my terminal now or shut down my laptop, it should keep running in the background. For that, this you can use one of two libraries, either PM2 or Forever. Forever is another library that lets you run your application forever, or PM2 is also a process manager that you can use to start Node.js application. इसका फायदा क्या होगा? They'll run in the background. You will not be stuck here when you run npm run start. You will not be stuck here. आपका टर्मिनल अटक नहीं जाएगा. It will start in the background, and if it crashes, PM2 will restart it. So your application will always be up. How do you do PM2? How do you use PM2? First, install it globally. npm install -g PM2. I am doing it in both the terminals, so साथ साथ दोनों होते रहे. After this is done, what is the command I want to run forever? What is the command I want to keep running? And if the application crashes, restart. It is npm run start, right? So the way to run PM2 start, I think it is this. I Google this usually. Usually PM2 is PM2 start index.js, like that. You give it a JavaScript file, it keeps running it in the background. But we don't, I mean, ideally we want to run a JavaScript file only, so we can actually do this. But ideally what you want is npm run start ko start kar. I want PM2 to start, PM2 start, npm run start. So I think this is the command you have to run. Seems like it is wrong. Yeah. So here we Google PM2 start. npm run start. As you can see, I've already seen this because this is what I always open. PM2 start npm dash dash start. Sorry, that is the one. And I think it might be good for us to give names to our applications as well. So let's start with PM2 start dash dash name HTTP server dash dash start. Let me start it over. pm2 start npm, this is the name, and this is the script that I want to run, which is npm run start. As you can see, it is telling you कि यार एक process है with id 0, उसका name है http server, the name that I gave over here. Mode fork, I don't know if this is that forking or not, ignore. Status online. Mode fork matlab there are ways to start a process, right? You can fork a process if you've done the cluster module or you understand general forking in C++ if you've done. Okay, the way to start processes is sometimes one process can fork a different process. I think that is what it means. Okay, PM2 has forked this process. Could be wrong. We should Google eventually. How much CPU is it using? How much memory is it using? Since it is a process manager, it can spawn a process and calculate how much CPU it is using, how much memory it is using. First process is running. My terminal is not stuck. I did not have to run npm run start and wait. It started it for me. If I run npm run start again, it says yeah, port is already in use. If I run npm run start again, it says yeah, वो तो already चल रहा है. PM2 has already started. If I do PM2 logs 0, I will see the logs of my HTTP server. Okay, हाँ यार, HTTP server has indeed started. So can I similarly start the WebSocket server? PM2 start the WebSocket server and the Next.js server. PM2 start frontend server. So these are the three commands that I ran. I ran npm start, sorry, PM2 start npm, the name of my process, and what script I want to run. In all three of these, I want to run npm run start. If I now see PM2 list, I see three processes that are running: 3001, 3002, and 3000. All three ports पे मेरी processes चल रही हैं. Same I have to do for the production server. What is the difference between them? This is connecting to the production database. This is connecting to the dev database. That is the only difference for now. And of course, our domains are pointed for staging here for production over here. So now I'm going to run the same three commands. commands here. Apps slash HTTP server. pm to start npm dash dash name HTTP server dash dash start. It started the HTTP server for me. What was the second command I have to run? Same thing, but in the WebSocket server. pm to start npm dash dash name is going to be ws server dash dash start. And then I will go to the front end folder and run the same command. This time I will call it FE server or front end server. If I do pm to list here, I see 3 processes running. When I did pm to list here, I saw 3 processes running. So everything looks good. How can we confirm कि ये चल रही हैं कि नहीं? I can just check कि क्या इस machine के port 3000 पे कुछ चल रहा है? Is there anything running on port 3000 here? What was the IP of my machine? The IP of my machine was कहाँ है DigitalOcean? This one. So this colon 3000 create React application is working. There is nothing logged over here because, as I said, database does not have a username. What was the code that we were running in the Next.js application? Get the username and render it on the screen. Nothing logged over here because, as I said, database does not have a username. What was the code that we were running in the Next.js application? Get the username and render it on the screen. Now, since our database does not have a user, nothing is getting rendered on the screen. User is null. This is empty. This is empty. That is why you see an empty page over here when I go to 3000. When I go to 3001, it says upgrade required, which means this is the WebSocket server. When I go to 3002, you can see it says hi there. So respective ports pe to chal gaye. They are now running on their respective ports. Same will be true for the other server as well. Now we need to run all of them on port. Which one? 80. I cannot give my friend a URL that looks like what was it? Week 25 ws.10kdevs.com:3000. What did we call the domain? Manage domains. 10kdevs.com. DNS. It was called week 25 ws.10kdevs.com:3000. 10kdevs.com here, kuch aur hai. Let's try to ping this. Ping this. It was called week 25 ws.10kdevs.com:3000. 10kdevs.com here, kuch aur hai. Let's try to ping this. Ping week 25 ws.10kdevs.com. Unknown host. So my DNS propagation hasn't happened. Week 25 ws.10kdevs.com is not yet pointing to the right domain. Let's try a different one. Ping.10kdevs.com. unknown host, ping staging dot this thing, unknown host. Is it called something else? 10kdevs.com DNS. So my DNS hasn't propagated, or I missed something very obvious. Pretty sure my DNS hasn't propagated. How can you check? Check DNS propagation. There are tools that you can use. Basically, this takes a long time. Whatever we are doing right now, week 25.10kdevs.headexfs.com to. Wow, I'm stuck. Hello. Yeah, at least my camera is stuck. Okay, I think we're back. Camera still seems stuck. Okay, there we go. So this takes a long time for it to point to an IP. So as you can see, when we check this, it is only, it's not working anywhere. I wonder why. I wonder if it's because 10kdev is an unused domain. I haven't used it for a while. The DNS propagation is taking so long. It can take up to 4 hours, but I wouldn't have expected this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do the same thing on 100xdevs also, like the other domain that I have. So that over there, most probably the DNS propagation will happen immediately. Abhi ke liye, DNS doesn't seem to have propagated, which means this URL is not pointing to this IP for now. It will in a few hours. After the class, if you check this out, if this is the recording, you can check it. It will be pointing to that URL. But since it has not happened yet, let me do it on the 100xdevs domain. There is no reason that should work. Most probably that will also take a long time for DNS propagation. So let's see. week25fe.100xdevs.com. I'm going to point to this IP. Staging.week25fe.100xdevs.com. I'm going to point to this IP. And then week25http. I'm going to point to this. By the way, all of this that I'm doing can also be controlled via code. If you've heard of infrastructure as code, this is another thing you shouldn't do. You shouldn't log into your data, your DNS provider and put these entries. These should happen via code automatically, which is something we'll come to when we reach infrastructure as code. Add record, a record to this guy, save, and the last one, add record, a record to this guy. So DNS propagation happens on various DNS servers, which is what you check over here. Okay, कौन से region में it is accessible? In what regions can you access this? Can you create a website like this? It's not too difficult to build. All you have to do is check. Okay, you have to have servers in a bunch of countries, and then just ping that specific domain name and see whether or not it resolves, right? So you can create a website like this yourself. Let's see, has it happened now? No. 10kdevs का तो नहीं हो रहा. Let's try for the other domain, 100xdevs. इसका हो गया. There's no reason for it. Or maybe 10kdevs is an unused domain, that's why. But this has propagated. So I'm going to use the 100xdevs domain today. I'm not using the 10kdevs domain. Now if I go to this :3000, you will see I see the front end. If I go to this :3001, I see the WebSocket. 3002, I see that. Even though I'm on week 25 WS, if I go to port 3000, I see the front end. Why? Because under the hood, ये तो इसकी IP पे ही point कर रहा है ना. This is just pointing to its underlying IP of the server. Same for HTTP, same for front end. So doesn't matter what URL I use over here. The port is what actually matters. I can go to WS over here, but if I'm going to port 3000, I see the front end code, even though I'm on the WebSocket domain. Why? Because this is just getting converted to the IP, versus this port is what actually matters. Okay? Great, our applications are deployed. What is bad here? You can't share a URL like this with your friend of yours. So what do I have to do? I have to run it on port 80. I have to run something on port 80, which is already running. Nginx. What is running? Nginx. What is Nginx? We have covered last week. It is a reverse proxy. It is what you use to make sure week 25 ws.100xdevs.com points to the first process, week 25 http.100xdevs.com points to the second process, so on and so forth. So I have to now configure Nginx. If you are seeing this page, Nginx is running. Further configuration is required, which is what I'm going to add now. I'm going to add further configuration for my Nginx. I'm going to configure my Nginx next. How do you do that? Sudo v/etc/nginx.conf. Again, we have covered this last week. So, if this is a little overwhelming, this was covered last week. Sudo v/etc/nginx/nginx.conf. Same thing I have to do here. Sudo v/etc/nginx/nginx.conf. And here I have to change the Nginx configurations in both the places. So let me delete everything from both of them. Let me add my own Nginx configuration. How do I add it? We Google again. इसका syntax तो मैं भी कभी याद नहीं रखता हूँ वैसे. Rarely do you create these files. Once you create and forget. Nginx reverse proxy configuration. Let's see. Or you can also find them on projects.100xdevs.com. Nginx. This is what we covered last week. This was our Nginx configuration. Excuse me. For one process. Let me open this in Visual Studio Code. This was This was our Nginx configuration for one process. Okay, yaar, listen on port 80 whenever someone sends a request on week 25 WS .100xdev.com, proxy it to localhost colon 3001, where our WebSocket server was running. This is where our WebSocket server was running. Whenever there is a request to port 80 coming from week 25 http.netxdev.com, reverse proxy it to the process running on port 3002. And lastly, whenever there is a request coming on port 80 to week 25 frontend.netxdev.com, proxy it to localhost colon 3000. ये तीन server components I have written. The first one is saying कि whenever a request comes on port 80 from week 25 ws.netxdev.com, उसको reverse proxy कर देना to the process running on localhost colon 3000. Similarly, the second one says whenever a request comes on week 25 http.netxdev.com, then proxy it to 3002. Similarly, third one, frontend पे आ गया तो proxy to the frontend. This is my Nginx conf for the production server. Prod server पे domain name is this. Staging server पे domain name is something else. But the prod server, which I think was the left one right here, yeah, root add prod. So this is my production server. Here I paste this Nginx conf, and on the dev server, I just have to replace. क्या dev server पे तो लोग इससे hit नहीं करेंगे. Dev server पे the URL that is pointing there is staging.week25 http. The URL that is pointing there is staging.week25 frontend, and similarly staging.week25 ws. So these are the three URLs for the dev server. Copy it, paste it, and good to go. अगर ये complicated